1 Samuel chapter 28. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." Achish replied, "Very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life." So Achish thinks that David's going to be a servant for life. He has David come out with him to fight against Israel. This is the problem when he goes and lives in the land of his enemies. Now he's going to have to take him and his soldiers and fight against his own brothers. He's going to have to fight against his own people. And this was not something that God lined up. This was something that David's own actions lined up. He really kind of put himself in a tough, unfortunate situation. And it's really cool how God works it out where he doesn't have to fight his own brothers and sisters. But I really do believe that this is kind of one of the consequences of his choice, is that sometimes when we think we're doing things in the natural that work out, we can find ourselves in a sticky or compromising situation. Verse 3, now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritists from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all Israel and set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. Saul then said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is a medium so I may go inquire of her." Basically, he says, go get me a witch. He says, go get a sorcerer so that I can try to do some witchcraft to try to call upon the Lord or talk to Samuel from the dead. There is one in Endor, they said. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes. And at night he and 2 men went to the woman. "Consult a spirit for me," he said, "and bring up for me the one I name." But the woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death?" Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this." Then the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Bring up Samuel," he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Don't be afraid. What do you see?" The woman said, "I see a ghostly figure coming up out of the earth." "What does he look like?" he asked. "An old man wearing a robe is coming up," she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" "I am in great distress," Saul said. "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me." He's finally come to the conclusions that God's moved on. God has gone a different route. He has pushed against God so much that the Spirit of the Lord has left Saul. He doesn't know what to do because Samuel, really the only spiritual voice in his life, has died, and David, the only one that truly served him, he's ran off. Basically, Saul's ruined every relationship he has, just to be honest with you. He says, I don't know what to do. I'm in great distress. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams, so I've called on you to tell me what to do. Samuel said, "Why do you consult me now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and give it to one of your neighbors, to David, because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites." He's referring to something we learned about in chapters prior, where Saul was told to kill the king, the people, and all the animals, and he left the king and some of the animals alive, and he was told that he would no longer be the king of the Lord because of this. He had violated God's command too many times and not carried it out with obedience. He said, "The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's words. His strength was gone, for he had eaten nothing all day and all night. When the women came to Saul and saw that he was greatly shaken, she said, "Look, your servant has obeyed you. I took my life in my hands and did what you told me to do. Now please listen to your servant and let me give you some food so you may eat and have strength to go on your way." He refused and said, "I will not eat." But his men joined the women in urging him, and he listened to them. He got up from the ground and sat on the couch. The woman had a fattened calf at the house, which she butchered at once. She took some flour, kneaded it, and baked bread without yeast. Then she set it before Saul and his men, and they ate. That same night they got up and left. Chapter 29. The Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. Okay, so we flopped stories. We're hearing the same story, but we're hearing it from alternative sides. We've just heard about how David went with Achish, and he was his bodyguard, and he was being pulled out with the Philistines to go to battle against Israel. We hear how Saul's on the other side with Israel. He's terrified. They're overwhelmed. They feel like they're totally outnumbered and they're going to get defeated. He goes to a witch to try to call up Samuel from the dead to talk to him. Samuel says, look, you're going to die tomorrow. Sorry, Israel's going to be defeated. You and all your sons, y'all are going down. I told you this was going to happen. Like, Saul, this shouldn't surprise you. Now it's jumping back over to David, and he's with the Philistines. The commander of the Philistines asked, what about these Hebrews? Achish replied, is this not David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now, I have found no fault in him. But the Philistine commanders were angry with Achish and said, send the man back that he may return to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Really, in this moment, I believe God is preserving David from going into battle and fighting his own people, and it being said of David that there was a great slaughter at the hands of David, and that the king and all of his sons died at the hands of David, because that's what would have been said by the enemies against him. But God preserves him and sends him back home. And it actually would work out even better for him, because when he gets back home, he sees that Ziklag, the city that he came from, was raided by pirates and burned to the ground. And if he would have stayed in the battle and God wouldn't have kept them from going to this battle, he would have returned home even later, tired and with less men, because they would have been in battle, and he may not have ever seen his family again. So really, God, even though God's not mentioned here, so to speak, God is at work behind the scenes. So Achish called David and said to him, as surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until today, I found no fault in you, but the rulers don't approve of you. Now turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers. But what have I done? Asked David. What have you found against your servant from the day until I came until now? Why can't I go and fight the enemies of my lord the king? Achish answered, I know that you have been as pleasing in my eyes as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said he must not go up with us into battle. Now get up early, along with your master's servants who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it is light. So David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. God kept David from going into this battle, I believe, to preserve David and David's good name. At the same time, in keeping David from this battle, David is going back home to Ziklag, which is a journey away, and when he gets there, he will learn that his family, all of the men's families, have been kidnapped and the city's been burned to the ground. But good news, we'll learn in our next video, God would go before them and they would recover all. Be blessed today.